Night in the Woods is an indie game about alienation, rural decay, deindustrialization, depression, disassociation, dysfunctional family relations, and above all, friendship. There you go. That's it. That's the video essay. Launched via Kickstarter in October of 2013.
Whatever, it's 2009!
Night in the Woods is an indie narrative-driven adventure game, or what you could call a walking simulator, despite my disdain for the term.
Go ahead. Take it from me.
Designed by Alex Aloka, Scott Benson, and Bethany Hockenberry, alongside artists such as Finn Ruthner and Charles Hutner, whose animating talents were added via stretch goal, as well as programming help from John Manning and Paris Buttfield Addison. Okay. The game follows college dropout, poster child for untreated mental illness, and anarchist icon Mae Borowski in her return to her hometown of Possum Springs after a 2-year stint at college. And boy, if things changed. We'll touch on this more later, but over the course of the game, and even before the plot really begins to set in around Act 2, the dialogue-based storytelling really hammers home that while Mae went off to college, the town of Possum Springs declined in her absence. Although she returns desperately seeking her old home, she slowly discovers that it just isn't there anymore. You know who is here, though? Greg. Greg rules, okay? Okay? Greg, one of Mae's best friends and longtime companion in crime, now works at the Snack Falcon, this game's legally nondescript version of your regional gas station chain desperately trying to be a bodega. Shortly after reuniting with Greg, you will be introduced to what I can only describe as Mae's inner circle, or alternatively Mae's only friend. We have B, or Beatrice Santello, goth queen, socialism enjoyer, unwilling adult, and college desirer. Also, she plays drums. I mean laptop. I mean, she can program drums on a laptop using a DAW. And on vocals or growls, we have Angus, Greg's boyfriend, staunch atheist, fedora wearer, and oh god, he's a Reddit atheist, isn't he? He's one of those damn. We will tolerate no Angus slander in this household. He is a good bear, damn it. While the main cast is full of personality, proper character development, witty, interesting dialogue, and tons of heartfelt moments, we also have the absolute luxury of, and I cannot stress this enough, one of the best cast of supporting characters I have ever seen in an indie game. We have Selmers, a poet, who can be found on Mae's daily walk through town and will share gossip, thoughts on life, and what begins as silly, cheesy poems. Notice I said begins. We have Mr. Chazikov, Mae's old science teacher, who will provide you with both fun and wholesome stargazing minigame, as well as deeply thought-provoking conversations about the stories of the constellations that may or may not be as close as Mae will ever get to therapy. Fuck, okay, I maybe could have reworded that one. Pastor K, who, while I cannot ignore the pastor with a more wholesome interpretation of Christianity trope at play here, is inarguably a shining example of the actual benefit of having religious figures who actually adhere to the giving, community-driven side of the religious tenets rather than the dogmatic, oppressive expressions of it we're more used to seeing in our current socio-political landscape. We also have Germ. I fucking love Germ. On top of being an absolute master of this game's version of Tony Hawk Pro Skater, and owner of Dynamite, a ditch-diving extraordinaire, and a possum befriender, Jeremy Wharton, or Germ Motherfucking Warfare, is technically part of the main cast, although honestly, given how he isn't introduced on day one as part of the band, I had a bad habit of ignoring the possible encounters with him until this playthrough. He provides an interesting insight into the kind of down-to-earth nature and freedom that life on the fringes of society can offer. And even though he isn't exactly contributing economically in the way that, say, Angus, B, and Greg are, he still seemed to enjoy a certain contentment with life that underscores the fact that even as jobs, money, and businesses leave Possum Springs, there will always be a community just on the other side of the tracks, and at the rate of Possum Springs' decay, it'll surely grow fast. While Night in the Woods makes no secret of its political undertones, it never indicates towards them in a way that feels forced.
Gay beer? What is this?
All the dialogue comes across as natural. These aren't buzzwords slapped in to generate commentary and reaction. These are conversations you've probably heard a million times if you've grown up in a similar environment as the town of Possum Springs. They're your friend who grew disillusioned after entering the workforce and, while begrudgingly remaining in it to make ends meet, wants a fair economic condition for them and those around them. It's the younger people working their asses off to make it out of town, to go where the jobs are and the people are, to escape it before it eats them for one reason or another. It's your parents who used to have a comfortably middle-class existence before the recession and are now left with a paycheck-to-paycheck existence and a retirement that they might not live to see. Most of all, though, it's these insufferable pricks in the city council, dude. Oh my fucking god.
He's mine!
You want to get to him, you got to go through me.
And me.
Me too.
We already talked about the wonderful supporting cast of the game, but this particular set of characters stands out both for the exclusively environmental dialogue they provide, as well as for the point that they seemingly dance around with every conversation, but which the game is trying to hammer home for you as the player every step of the way. Possum Springs is dying. The world, or really the economy, has moved on from the mining operations that made Possum Springs function at its inception, and with it went the union jobs that they had fought for tooth and nail, literally, to make the town a place where they could comfortably provide for their families. One job for a living wage, which remains the base desire for nearly every member of the American workforce. Or at least the ones who haven't bought into that Andrew Tate, hustle and grind, fresh and fit podcast, bury your emotions and embrace toxic masculinity until you succeed at the economy bullshit.
She got that Twitch streaming, cosplaying, cupcake bacon.
The city council, Kathleen, Colleen, Andrew, and Gary, are trying in vain to bring the attention of the market back to the town through tourism, attractions, monuments, and the town's image above all else. But the game takes care to tell you through conversations with May's father about his new grocery store job, through the business closings we see throughout the course of the game, and through dialogue from the core cast about their living conditions, that the market has simply moved on. Service jobs, now the backbone of America's economy, are all that's left, and with the highway being redirected around Possum Springs, there aren't enough people to serve. In other words, there aren't enough jobs left in Possum Springs for the young adults who grew up there to join the workforce and remain in the town, and the ones that are available to the older residents don't pay as much or respect them as much as the ones in the town's past. This story is one that most young adults know all too well, and it's one that's led to one of America's current primary political schisms. Rural decay, also known as deruralization or deindustrialization, is a phenomenon most Western countries experienced in the decades following the Second World War. Essentially, as productivity increased in the industrial sector, such as mining and manufacturing, employment initially rose before reaching a tipping point at which greater productivity could be achieved with less workers. This ties into the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. While Adam Smith initially observed this as a phenomenon within a capitalist system in The Wealth of Nations, the term is most associated with Karl Marx's causal solutions within the third volume of On Capital, his comprehensive critique of the early industrialized economic system present in Europe in the late 19th century. Marx theorized, correctly in the United States case, that increased technological innovation would allow production to become more efficient until reaching a tipping point. Once those same technological advantages had been spread across the whole of the economy without an increase in demand, it would trigger a decrease in the amount of labor required to meet that demand. Less employment means less money in the economy, which long-term means less demand and falling profits. In the case of the United States, the initial waves of deindustrialization and the ongoing tendency of the profit rate to fall were marked by a transition from both rural and urban economies that had become enriched in the post-war era by both rising consumer demand and the industrial foundation that the war economy and military-industrial complex had built, towards an economy held up by a massive service industry, concentrated primarily in urban population centers. And as rural and some urban industrial centers in the US began to depopulate in favor of cities with more available jobs, i.e. the Rust Belt, textile hubs in the Southeast, etc., the towns that were built on mining and manufacturing suddenly found themselves without their economic spine. And with each blow the economy deals, whether through recessions, inflation, or otherwise, it is felt doubly so in the already decimated populations that remain in these post-deindustrialization communities. This is a subject that Night in the Woods tackles at all levels head on, even making the primary motivation of the cult that takes center stage in the game's second act an economic one. The city council serves as a sort of mirrored image to the cult. Both are trying to restore the town to a prior glory, both not realizing that through more monuments or through more sacrifices, that version of Possum Springs simply will not and cannot come back. The economy has moved on, and unless the town confronts this reality, they will simply fade away, left behind by the churning waves of capitalism. While Night in the Woods directly tackles socio-economic concepts and themes within the span of the game, the other major themes of the game stem from an emphasis on mental unwellness, or in this case, a blend of the two concepts. Because it's time for me to dust off the knowledge gained in that one political philosophy class I took. One of the core themes of the game is alienation, whether stemming from economic conditions, as is the case with Bee and Greg, or by conditions that are more social in nature, as we see in May and Germ. The first kind of alienation is best described by Marx's theory of alienation. Sorry, I wish he thought of a better title too. This take on the psychological phenomenon ties it to the loss of humanity that one undergoes within the workforce. As a simple cog in the machine, expendable, replaceable, and unworthy of further respect, the qualities that attach a worker to their humanity are stretched thin. And once this realization of their own situation is attained, it is impossible to go back. We see this most obviously in Bee, who, while she would like to go to college, expand her social circle, and meet more like-minded people, she is trapped in the position of running the family business, taking care of her father, and struggling with the realities of being an adult in the modern era. She is alienated from herself, her interests, and her passions by the stresses of everyday life, mostly surrounding her job. She can't simply ignore this reality, and this culminates several times in her expressing her deep frustration with May as she fails to grasp Bee's inescapable responsibilities and routines, as well as the seeming impossibility of her broader desires. Greg, meanwhile, provides a counterexample to this phenomenon. While he knows he has to grow up in a sense, with every interaction, Greg displays a will to preserve his humanity, personality, and everything that makes him him, in spite of his boring, draining job situation. While he is more defined in character development by the economic pressure placed on he and Angus and their desire to escape Possum Springs, Greg's struggle and defiance against becoming boring or alienated by a situation drives his character growth towards some happy medium between a troublemaker and a responsible adult. In examining the social alienation that May and Germ reflect within the story, Max Stirner's view of alienation from the self due to outside influences and social pressures is more relevant. In The Ego in Its Own, Stirner argues that we as individuals are affected, negatively so, by socially influential concepts described as spirits, which constrain our thoughts, ideas, and actions. These spirits could be something as simple as expectations placed upon you by your relatives, their idea of what you ought to be transposed onto your beliefs about what you should be, or as large and complex as religion's effects on your system of ethics and how you approach life. From Stirner's lens, we can see May's own internal conflict between her desires for herself, or lack thereof at times, and the social pressures placed upon her by both her family and society at large.
I'll tell you what you get! Call the police! Get what you fucking deserve!
Her family and members of her community tell her in so many words that she should want more for herself, while never giving consideration to what May really wants, which not only brings her into conflict with society, but with herself. May's lack of self-confidence, issues with her personal image, and fears about her social situation are all mostly stemming from the fact that she feels rejected by society, because society has alienated her from herself. In a similar counterexample as Greg provides for Bee, Germ serves an example of someone who, while alienated by society, refuses to allow society to alienate him from himself. Although Germ lives on the wrong side of the tracks and isn't seen as a productive member of society to the point that he is at one point targeted by the cult for sacrificing, he is unabashedly, unapologetically himself. He doesn't care much for social cues. He cares deeply about the nature around him and preserving it, even if it chips away at the civilization of Possum Springs. And he's a fucking whiz at Tony Hawk Pro Skater, which is definitely related, I promise. All in all, Night in the Woods offers some powerful and relatable character examples for those suffering from alienation, whether socially or economically, as well as equally powerful examples of characters who refuse to allow alienation to beat them.
Total disassociation, fully out your mind. Googling derealization, hating what you find.
Alright, I'm going to preface this section by saying that I am deeply unqualified to talk about the medical conditions that can cause disassociation or other psychological phenomena outside of a strictly thematic context as it relates to their portrayal in this game. If you've got your PhD in knowing how brains work and such, then feel free to let me know if I've misrepresented disassociation or any other conditions in the comments. Or, if you just want to tell me that you think I'm a big smelly man who should quit talking about your favorite 2017 indie game like it's a philosophical wonder to be pondered. Anyway, with that out of the way, while Night in the Woods tackles most of the psychological themes it presents from a standpoint rooted in the socioeconomic conditions affecting the psyche of the character in question, the central conflict within May is presented as uniquely, purely psychological in nature, chiefly through May's trippy, surrealist, and interpretive dream sequences, as well as dialogue clues which ultimately lead to her explanation at length towards the end of the game. May appears to be suffering from disassociation, not only in the form of detachment from the emotions surrounding her present situation, but in the form of total detachment from reality. An infamous incident in which May hospitalized another middle schooler, which is referenced throughout the game, is ultimately explained by May as a reaction to a sudden shift in her perception that resulted in her grasp on reality, and her vision of life losing all meaning, pixelating down to just varying shapes that she cannot relate back to what they truly are. It is in this way that May displays a trait that cannot be simply explained away as a product of her environment. Greg, for example, has issues finding a happy medium for himself because he is conflicted between his past ways and ideals and the future he wants to build with Angus. B is depressed, sardonic, and angry because there is inner conflict between what she wants for herself and her existing responsibilities, and she's far from the only example of depression in Possum Springs because of these things. But May disassociates because why?
Yeah, because why?
Most of the characters outside of May have issues that are rooted in the conditions they find themselves in, rather than some metaphysical amalgamation of problems that are more gestured at than outright explained in the game. Does May disassociate because of the trauma surrounding her dad's past alcoholism? Does it stem from the dysfunctional relationship between herself and her mother because of her habit of acting out in the past and her mother's anger at her for wasting all the financial stress she and her dad went through in trying to put her through college? Or does she simply disassociate because ultimately she really has no idea what to do with her life, and subconsciously she finds herself so foreign in her interaction with society that she finds her perception sees reality coming apart at the seams? The game ultimately leaves this up for interpretation. At face value, May's dissociative state was due to the influence of certain outer beings on the town of Possum Springs, the same beings that Casey was sacrificed to. Oh, have I not mentioned Casey yet? Casey Hartley offers a parallel to May in certain ways as an unseen former member of the friend group who goes missing. The town, including his friends, all assume that he has simply hopped a train in order to escape the town and the life he is bound to within it. In a lot of ways, Casey serves as an example of the path that May is heading down if she cannot find some role or place for herself in society. I don't think it was unintentional to make him the only other person among May's friends who, like May, is anthropomorphized as a cat. In the confrontation with the cult, they admit to sacrificing Casey, even going on to claim that they were doing him a favor. From their perspective, there was no good that Casey could contribute to society. They didn't look at him as an individual, but rather purely by his utility to the town. And in their summation, his usefulness ended at being tossed down a hole as a blood offering to some form of deity known as the Black Goat. At face value, the Black Goat gave May her strange dreams and brought about the arc that appeared to her friends as a descent into madness. Interpretively, though, the cult and the Black Goat are a metaphor for May's relationship with society, and when she confronts the Black Goat briefly, she states her intent. She wants life to have meaning, no matter if it hurts. Rather than be crushed under boot by forces far beyond her control and events that were set in motion long before she was even born, she chooses to confront reality head-on and take her own meaning out of life, thus shaking her from her depression and existential stress as well as her disassociative state. Obviously, in real life, that's not exactly how it works. Everyone is different and it can take any number of things to heal psychological damage and trauma, but in Night in the Woods, often credited as a coming-of-age story, this conflict is resolved within May in one of the most satisfying ways possible, by having her decide to confront her inner turmoil head-on. After, witnessing a kidnapping, being actively stalked by a cult, learning that her friend was murdered by said cult, and returning home to a dying town, a strained relationship with her mother, and friends who seem to be moving on in life when she just isn't. But things aren't always what they seem. May's friends, from the moment she returns to town in Greg's case, strive to understand May's plight, even when they don't necessarily believe that things are as bad as she believes they are. Even B, with her inherent differences and struggle to relate to May, manages to push past May's shortcomings in growing to accept her for who and what she is. In the end, even when May insists on taking on what she sees as her battle head-on and alone, her friends show up for her and push through with her to the bitter end. In a lot of ways, Night in the Woods reflects the truth of modern America's social atmosphere. Though we lack the safety nets provided to the downtrodden to various degrees across Europe, our social circles and friends have, in a way, become our own social safety nets. In the thematic sense, Night in the Woods takes the core concept of the social safety net, the group of friends that picks you up when you're kicked down, and simply expands it into the creepy, cosmic horror second act that sees May's friends coalesce around her, even if they don't necessarily believe her when she says she's being followed by a ghost. I know the power of friendship is a massive cliche, a weakly gestured to ideal that we can't help but keep around for the sentiment, but in reality, it's got more weight than the media that uses it as a crutch would lead you to believe. And I'd say that Night in the Woods is one of only maybe a handful of examples in the past decade that really does the trope justice, showing why it still carries weight for us and is capable of impacting us on a deep level. But fuck all that noise, let's get crazy. Metaphors? Themes? Ideals? That's all nerd shit. Night in the Woods is a game about unspeakable eldritch horrors who either don't fucking care or are fucking hungry. Yes, I will be taking the game fully literally from this point on. Yes, I have gone insane. Do you know what I have to live through every day? It's no wonder that this beautiful game would drive me right off a cliff into the depths of insanity. See this janitor that you meet at the beginning of the game? What if I were to tell you that the janitor is the forest god? How else would he know to play that character and give May sage life advice that just so happen to be the lines for the updated Harfest play, and also welcome her back to town and appear several more times to give her sage advice? He is clearly the avatar of a higher being sent to assist May directly when facing her greatest challenge of all, beating the Black Goat. Greg? Lovable, but couldn't pull the trigger when the chips were down. B? She hates May, I know she does. Angus? He's fucking hiding something, goddammit. But the janitor holds the key. He's why May refused to fall into the hole. She was Casey's true avenger, and only by earning his favor, by fetching him a free-ass cola, was she able to succeed in this task. All hail the forest god. All hail the janitor. All hail the... Sorry about that. Night in the Woods is more than likely one of the most fascinating indie games made within the last 10 years, and it's a shame that one of the game's creators was at the center of a drama that was rife with toxicity. Oh god, please don't make me do it. From its exploration of wildly relevant themes like rural decay, worsening economic conditions, and the struggle to find one's place in society, to its unique and endearing art style, well-written characters, and plain replayability. Sure, it's not exactly a game you're going to spend weeks on, but I always find myself booting it up every year around the time that fall hits for another run, and I think that if you, for whatever reason, clicked on a video about this game without having played it, it's well worth your time. In summary, if you're looking for a game you can get lost in without completely detaching yourself from reality, relatable characters who face relatable challenges and struggles, and genuinely some of the best sound design I've ever had the pleasure to come across, then this just might be the game for you. Oh, and did I mention that it has a full roguelike embedded within the game? Hey, so if you made it this far, thank you. I've been wanting to dive into video essays. It's the kind of content that I like to make most for quite a while now. And after getting very distracted grinding out affiliate on Twitch... Winston Lights 100? I mean Winston from Overwatch? I mean Winston Churchill? I'm settling into this format going forward. If you liked it, stay tuned. I've got more ideas on weird, out of the way, or just plain unique pieces of media to analyze and talk about. If you don't, well, more than happy to keep talking about these kinds of things for my own self-satisfaction. But if you think I'm getting something wrong, let me know in the comments. I'm open to feedback. This video wouldn't have been possible without some outstanding video essayists who have covered this game in the years since its release, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Flundering Chipper's Monstrous Existence video, which was much longer, more in-depth, and gave meaningful and insightful time to the controversy surrounding Alicaloka, as well as Writing Women's many incredible character analyses on the game. Her video Doomed on B was immensely helpful to me when trying to articulate B's character and examining the theme of alienation within the game. So, cannot thank you enough to all the creators who have inspired me and have kind of pushed this topic to an envelope that my funny jump cuts and surface level analysis can't really get to. So yeah, this has been Das Mystikal, signing out.